Today we are talking about two movies from the 1950s that deal with alien invasions, but things might get a little deep, I'm just gonna warn you. With the looming fear of the Cold War and the threat of nuclear annihilation, there was a horror and science fiction boom in the 1950s. Many films showcased a fear of the other, as seen through depictions of alien invasions. The catastrophic results of the atomic bomb inspired many films by depicting various living beings as mutated versions of themselves. I Married a Monster from Outer Space and It Came from Outer Space both depict aliens that are able to duplicate humans on Earth. These and other films of the decade showed the evolving fears of Americans in particular. With McCarthyism spreading like wildfire, so did fears that those closest to us could be communist. We feared our neighbors, our friends, and even our spouses. Hello, I'm Ainsley, and this is The Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, media, with an emphasis on old movies and nostalgic favorites. Today, I'm excited to talk about I Married a Monster from Outer Space and It Came from Outer Space. Two films that I saw for the first time this month, and I have to say, I Married a Monster from Outer Space is definitely one of my new favorites in the horror genre. I also really did like It Came from Outer Space, and we'll be talking a lot more about that, but let's go to I Married a Witch from Outer... I Married a Witch? Did I say that? I Married a Witch is one of my favorite films as well, so if you hear me say witch, no you didn't, just pretend it's monster, okay? I Married a Monster from Outer Space stars Gloria Talbot as a wife who realizes that her husband is not the man who she married. He was not the man that she was like engaged to and in love with and married. Eventually, she discovers that her husband is not the only man that has changed. The film was directed by Jane Fowler Jr. from a script by Louis Vides. It's a lot less cheesy than the title suggests. This title is perfect for like drive-in fare. This was actually second place, or it was the B movie in films for the drive-in. It was the B movie to the Blob. And watching this, you'll probably 100% if you go and watch it, you're going to think this film is so much better than The Blob. At least that's my personal opinion. I think that this movie, while definitely having like some cheesy parts, definitely some B-movie fare, it also really touches on some very like serious stuff and things that people can honestly relate to. The storyline provides a thoughtful look at married life and starting a family. Cinematographer Haskell Boggs and editor George Tomasini helped to create an atmosphere that is hardly outmatched among other B-movie fare. Often compared to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I Married a Monster does have a similar storyline, but our protagonist is a married woman whose partner has lost interest in her and other things that he loves. It showcases how a writer and director's ability to give a film its own identity, even when it is similar to films that came before it. I can't really think of a lot of other films of the time period truly, at least in this way, deal with the idea of marrying somebody and you not seeing them as you may have saw them prior to your marriage, and the different conflicts that can occur in a marriage, especially when you're newly married. This takes over about the course of a year within a marriage, and a lot can happen to people in the beginning of their relationships. And this is no different. There's just an alien involved. The film's main character is a woman who recognizes the changes in her new husband. We get closer to her when she is struggling to get pregnant, and the doctor mentions bringing the husband in. I was honestly so shocked when this part came up because I was not expecting it in any way. This is not something you hear talked about a lot in films prior to 1960, and even in the 1960s it wasn't talked a lot about. So hearing this in a film that was released in 1958 and essentially discussed reproduction in a way that wasn't all, it's just, it's a woman's job to get pregnant and have a baby and raise a family and work and from home and be in the kitchen type of thing. No, this was a woman who was, struggling to have a baby, trying for a year, and the doctor wants to see the husband about it and see what may be going on down there for him. I also appreciated that it alluded to the fact that the fault may be that of the father, and that was frankly astonishing for me because the fault, even to this day, can often be put on the person who has the uterus, and there's no one is truly at fault when people are not able to have children, but that fault has universally been put on uterus and not on like the semen and stuff, Following its LA premiere on September 10th, the film was released in the US and Canada in October. Upon its release, I Married a Monster from Outer Space was a hit among critics and audiences. Part of a double bill with the Blob, I Married a Monster was originally slated for that A film. However, people really liked the whole monster in color thing for the Blob, so that was put as the A picture, where I Married a Monster from Outer Space was put as the B picture. While the film may be often overlooked by film historians due to the film's sensational title, the film has received good reviews both at the time of its release and by contemporary critics. Variety's review in 1958 said, Fowler's direction, while sometimes slow, latches onto mounting suspense as action moves to climax. He gets the benefit of outstanding special photographic effects from John P. Fulton, which aid in maintaining interest. Harrison's reports declared, this latest addition to the current cycle of science fiction horror melodramas is just as fantastic as the others in its category. But it is more imaginative than most and should prove to be a good supporting feature wherever such pictures are acceptable. 100% agree, Harrison reports. Thank you. Novelette-ish. That's alright, correct? Though novelette-ish in its personal story, has an intriguing situation and some effective, if rather sparse, trick camera work. It's definitely not overdone on the camera work, and I appreciate that. Sometimes you tend to overdo it. You want to be fancy with it when you should kind of just be a little bit more laid back. Danny Perry described it as an intelligent, atmospheric, subtly made sci-fi thriller. Tom Mullane of Time Out magazine found good performances, strikingly moody camera work, a genuinely exciting climax. Leonard Maltin called it a pretty good little rehash of Invasion of the Body Snatchers with some nice, creepy moments. I do, in fact, really like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Do not get me wrong. I love that movie. I like the 1970 version, or 70s version. I prefer I Married a Monster from Outer Space. I don't know if other people would feel that way, but I do. Because I think I like that it centers more so on the female protagonist and them being like, whoa, these men are acting weird. And she's taking the control. So that makes sense. In a world with a long list of films and television shows to keep us entertained, it can be difficult to stand out. Even back then, as more and more films were released along with television, it would be hard to make a movie, especially a movie with a minimal budget and market it to the masses. However, there were plenty of B-films that have gone on to become classics of the sci-fi genre and cult classics of the horror genre. I Married a Monster from Outer Space is one such film that has managed to stand out of the crowd of low-budget science fiction films made during the 1950s. It deserves to be recognized today for challenging the things that many in the industry refuse to talk about. It Came from Outer Space is not a movie I would say is quite as melodramatic as the one that came before it, and with that, it's not necessarily as deep either, but still pretty cool. Amateur astronomer John and his fiancée Ellen witness an asteroid fall from the sky while stargazing. When he goes to the crash site, he sees the spaceship before a mudslide covers it up. When he tells the police what he witnessed, he becomes the object of ridicule around town. When residents of the town begin to disappear, they begin taking John more seriously. Now, here's the thing. If you happen to be a witness to a UFO or, I don't know, anything that just may be a little weird or not something people know about, keep it to yourself and just gain some evidence. I completely understand the reason for wanting to be truthful, but we don't want you to get locked up now, okay? Jack Arnold, who also directed Creature from the Black Lagoon and other science fiction horror films, directed It Came from Outer Space from a screenplay by Harry Essex. Legend says that Essex took the full credit after changing dialogue from a script by Bradbury. Essex adapted the story from Ray Bradbury's film treatment, The Meteor. Clifford Stein, who is known for Western and horror films, was the cinematographer, while Paul Weatherwax, who would go on to win 2 Academy Awards for his work, edited the film. Irving Gertz, Henry Mancini, a name you probably recognize, and Herman Stein worked uncredited on the film's score. Bradbury offered 2 storylines to the studio, one with malicious aliens and the other with benign aliens. I wanted to treat the invaders as beings who were not dangerous, and that was very unusual. The studio picked the right concept and I stayed on. In his 2004 biography, Bradbury published 1 volume of 4 versions of his screen treatment for It Came from Outer Space. It's hard to not compare all of these films because they do have similar premise. It's all in the execution, and It Came from Outer Space's execution shows that so-called other isn't always malicious. That's not unlike I Married a Monster story that depicts aliens doing something in order to survive. It Came, however, showcases the aliens as being who unintentionally landed on Earth and are only trying to get back. Aliens are looking on with sympathy, and it's the humans who are out for vengeance that are seen as a problem once we reach the film's climax. Now, we do know that Americans, especially at this time, and not just Americans, have this big fear of commies, right? Science fiction films from the 50s often employ their aliens to be stand-ins for the Soviet Union and their particular brand of communism. For Bradbury, he went a different route and decided to make the aliens crash on Earth to be unintentional and their desire to leave Earth. They aren't on Earth purposely to inflict harm on humans and are simply there by mistake. It Came from Outer Space is a good example of how humans fail to listen to anyone they deem an outsider, a threat. While the miscommunication that occurs is understandable, the need to save the aliens from a militia is not far-fetched. Maybe we're not hunting aliens, but humans tend to always think that violence is the answer. And I mean this in the sense of not really having any need to negotiate when maybe negotiations, maybe a little education would do some good. Maybe we're not hunting aliens, but humans tend to always think that violence is the answer. And when It Came from Outer Space, John made sure that it wasn't. He took the lead. He got these aliens to safety. And whether we're speaking of things that happened prior to the 1950s, in the 1950s, or things that are happening now, the people who is looked on as a threat by the majority isn't always a threat, and sometimes it's the humans who are not looked down as a threat by the majority are the ones that are actually the threat. I chose to do a double feature on these films because they are similar, yes, but they also tell a story that manages to critique people. They critique human beings and their humanity. Whether that's how they react to something or someone that is different, or they use the film as an opportunity to showcase the similarities between people that are not the same, but are not so different after all. When it comes to human beings and human nature, there's always a sense of wanting a threat or an enemy and creating a threat or an enemy in anything. And in the 1950s, there were a lot of things that were going on that were true threats and problems to people, and not all of those existed in the US. And you can see that through these movies, and you can see that through a lot of the movies, the ones about mutations, anything about alien invasion, where there is this scare, people, they're being scared of something that was like the Soviet Union, communism in general. This is the McCarthy era, and that was a big inspiration on a lot of these films, particularly science fiction and horror. And the fears that these characters had and how they're portrayed in I Married a Monster from Outer Space and It Came from Outer Space tends to also just showcase that just because something is foreign to us does not mean that it's bad. And I think that's something that we all need to take into account. Thank you so much for watching this video. I don't know if it's as long as I initially thought it was going to be. I am always quite surprised by anything that I talk about, regardless if it's like 15 minutes or like 30 minutes. I'm shocked. I'm really thankful that you decided to click on this video and give it a watch. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, and I would love to have you stick around and spend the rest of the spooky season with me. I will be doing more spooky videos in the 1930s. I will be doing more like talking about older movies, but I will be going into November because while other places might be talking about Christmas already, I'm going to be discussing horror movies and spooky movies and scary movies and all that jazz. So if you have any recommendations or requests, please feel free to put that in the comments. Let me know if you've seen any of these films and what you think of them. It will help me with the algorithm, and I also just really love to hear from you. I highly recommend these movies. They are available to watch on streaming services. I believe one of them is available to watch on Paramount and Peacock. I just really hate talking about big companies because they're the monsters that we meet along the way. Thanks again for watching this video on I Married a Monster from Outer Space and It Came from Outer Space. I will be seeing you again soon, and bye!